Hello again, and welcome to a very experimental odd duck of an episode where I explore a topic very disconnected from my usual fare, specifically zombies.
Don't say that. What? That. The Z word. Don't say it. Why not? Because it's ridiculous.
Yes, zombies, be they grim commentary on the loss of freedom through the theft of a soul, a slow-moving metaphor for anything from economic systems to social decay, fast-moving infected with ties to medical and chemical malpractice, or mutagenic monsters. They really do it all, from horror to comedy to political commentary and beyond. But a common refrain when discussing the most well-known and slowest variant, often dubbed the Romero zombie thanks to Night of the Living Dead, is that it is supremely unrealistic for such creatures to have become the threat that they do, Shaun of the Dead even opting to highlight this with its ending. Now, I could snark on the relative realism of the dead coming back to life, but it is a common rule in writing to not ask your audience to buy too many unbelievable things in a short sequence. And there's no denying the execution of these undead has varied wildly in terms of quality, and audience familiarity has only fostered a degree of dismissiveness in those audiences. One I myself can't dismiss, and yet I wouldn't have titled the videos I did if I didn't think there was an interesting premise and story to be explored that could also be believable. With that in mind, let's explore how I believe a realistic slow zombie apocalypse could take place. But first, a thank you to my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible. Links below. Okay, let's get some quick notes out of the way first. 1. This is set on what is our world, so plenty of people will understand the gist of the undead. 2. These undead are a blend of Romero ghouls and Walking Dead walkers, meaning they are dead bodies that don't rot too quick with a degree of muscle memory that return to life upon dying to kill and/or grow their numbers, but are otherwise fairly passive. 3. It doesn't jump onto other animals, though that would be a cool premise. 4. Speaking of cool premises, I do think a fun way to revitalize the undead could be to either remove the moaning entirely and make them deathly silent, or have them speak by repeating last words, thoughts, or when synapses spark.
Sorry.
Such as when seeing a loved one, which would easily confuse and distress survivors early on and could degrade into moans. The source of the sickness is taking some inspiration from Night of the Living Dead, where it's implied a satellite crashing back to Earth brought something with it. In this case, it was scattered across the planet by Arctic winds and had a few week-long gestation period, letting it spread before anyone is even aware of it, but triggering only upon death. And finally, and before we outline how I feel this could go, I must stress the following. While I think this premise could lead to an apocalyptic scenario, it is not because of the undead themselves, but instead the nature of the world, but not in a humans are the real monsters kind of way, more a humans are dumb, panicky animals kind of way.
A person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it.
But to see how that works, let's begin with day 1. No one is going to know this is coming. This means someone who dies in bed next to their lover will roll over and eat them, and boom, second zombie. This means a homeless person tragically passes away in the night and attacks others, and even if the police respond as they often do, they won't know to go for the head right away. Side note, some modern bullets can at times glide through rather than obliterate body parts, so headshots might not always be ideal depending on the weapon. But on a much larger and more systemically impactful scale, hospitals and nursing homes will become bloodbaths with doctors and nurses and families not knowing that Grandpa is about to bite when he begins moving seconds after seemingly passing. So, on day 1, the world is going to lose a monstrous number of doctors and nurses, with many more unable or unwilling to go into work without greater protections, which would be hard to institute. Right off the cuff, this means a steep decline worldwide in medical care, leading to a higher daily mortality rate, which is already around 95,000 according to Worldometer. With losses of paramedics, doctors and nurses, I could see that multiply several-fold. Day 2. Just because many people know what zombies are does not mean they 100% believe this is what's happening. So you might have people hiding bites or doing some stupid stuff because their elderly neighbours died and they want to make a YouTube, or just refusing to follow the new rules. We've seen plenty of that since COVID, haven't we? Plus, in scenarios where someone falls and hits their head or has a heart attack, one doesn't necessarily know they are dead or a zombie yet, as we hardly rot at minute 1. Being able to make the call on if you should finish someone off in a dire situation for your or others' safety is a hard thing, even if you do believe, and that's without thinking of others' reactions. Put simply, there will be a lot of panic and confusion, even if it is widely announced and understood. Next stage, the early days. Even more integrally, think about the kind of people who not only believed it, but embraced it. Entire apocalypse movements will start believing that this is Judgment Day. Conspiracy theorists will be rallying their fellows that the shadow government is finally making their move, let alone a litany of people who have been waiting for a chance to be violent that now have the "they were a zombie I swear" excuse. All these people running around making everything vastly more violent and chaotic. And that is before you factor in the people who fight back against this stuff, justifiably so, be they government forces or people merely acting in self-defense, but all potentially adding to the undead's number. But even if handled, think of how much disease will be getting worse with all these bodies lying around and the time it takes to burn them, and again, less medical staff. But these have just been the reactions of relatively small groups or those not backed by capital and military resources, so let's look back at COVID again. Off the cuff, you have the 1% wanting people back at work like everything is normal as quickly as possible because disruptions to work disrupt profits. Plus, they may want to study the virus in the hopes it can cure the problem of death, so resources will be divided between cure-seeking and death-conquering. But then you have governments which will range in competence but also in malice versus compassion, with some seeking to use this opportunity to clamp down on the people to form a police state, and this potentially being resisted violently. There is also the deliberate withholding or misuse of disaster resources and personnel in key areas to either suppress a territory or undersupply it, which is before one factors in the more organised ideas like certain governments trying to use the pretense of zombies as an excuse to cull undesirable minorities, factions or forces. But of course resistance will happen and nations already riven with internal strife may fall into civil war. What's more, you need to factor in how all of this can be utilised by terrorists too. Poisoning the water supply of some nowhere town finally serves a practical purpose by creating a fifth column inside enemy territory that takes away time and resources. Then you need to factor in already active war zones. Sure, the zombies don't pose much of a threat, but on day one, a lot of medics will have had their faces bitten off, and the fallout from war means disease, starvation, stray gunfire, and death, as well as more bullets being spent on the dead, let alone people trying to use the undead strategically. But even more integrally, many countries may not stop going to war, be it for the resources, rank opportunism, or ideological motivations. War can easily happen. And if nukes fly, then the wave of irradiated zombies left over from the fallout would be nightmare enough, but with the EMP knocking out electronics would be even worse. None of which even addresses the simple fact that getting disaster relief and soldiers everywhere quickly is logistically impossible even before one factors in mismanagement. I.e., the idea that the military of any given country, even one as recklessly over-militarized as the USA, could deploy disaster relief everywhere, let alone swiftly, is a pipe dream even under a competent administration. There will be extensive territories, locations, and regions that are neglected by necessity, circumstance, or intent, and that's assuming the disaster-relieved areas are even handled well. All of which could lead to new conflicts emerging from those who feel left behind, over-policed, or like they're simply having their resources stolen, among many other reasons. And then you can factor in possible desertions too, if soldiers begin fearing for their loved ones or rejecting the new status quo, which could further weaken any organised response. Which leads us to the falling days. Because while all of this has been happening and continue getting worse, things like international trade will have been suffering. People not turning up to work, countries clamping down on trade to secure their own resources, and general chaos leading to a collapse in the shipping industry. Remember when one boat clogging up a canal was enough to majorly impact international trade? Now imagine all of the above happening and then tell me that medicine and bread is still being shipped on time to its desired location and then getting distributed properly. All of this means more sickness, more starvation, more upheaval, and with it, more deaths. The undead wouldn't be what brought society low. The untethering of systems and structures is what would cause an apocalyptic scenario. I imagine the undead wouldn't actually dominate extensive parts of the globe, and where they did hold sway, it'd be because of disease, neglect, and systemic collapse or massacres, as opposed to them having overwhelmed the living. I imagine a common refrain years down the line would be something like, "The dead didn't defeat the living. They were just all that was left when the dust cleared." Conclusion. So that's how I tackle the topic of a realistic slow zombie apocalypse. A breakdown in the systems and norms that keep our current world nominally working being ground to a halt by a spanner in the works too big and persistent to simply dislodge, leading to a cataclysmic breakdown thanks to how deceptively delicate it all is. Some places that are relatively sparse on population and self-sufficient in food might be able to handle things better than, say, a densely populated nation relying on imports. But there are truly no guarantees because it is never just the dead you're dealing with. There's a myriad of ways to tell such stories and countless potential locations to tell it from, be it in the early days of the fall to years into the seeming end of things, from nations or territories that survived the storm to survivalists barely clinging on. If there's enough interest, I might do a follow-up speculating on what a resulting world might look like or exploring some potential story ideas, but really it's anyone's game. Put simply, there would be no one type of societal collapse, but a myriad of them, and as a result, a huge variety of stories that could be told and social observations to be made. But for now, this is where I leave you. Hopefully you enjoyed this odd topic and the work of our wonderful guest editor. Thanks for tuning in.